I have been talking in the morning session about the great Jubilee calendar. And it's a topic that is not discussed very much in religious circles. Very few people have even heard of it, let alone have any idea about what it is. Because of that basic ignorance of its presence, many of the prophetic time periods in the Bible are incorrectly understood. Years ago, about 15 years ago, when I began coming to these conclusions, I was faced with a series of questions and issues that I had never heard before. And I had no one that I could really talk to except those around me at work, and I'd pester them every now and then, right, Luther? I'd bounce ideas off of them and try to see what they would say. And because I was hammering on certain ideas, I just didn't know where to turn. Well, one of the things that perplexed me as I studied the prophecies of Daniel and Revelation is that I concluded there had to be something that told me what the meaning of the prophecies had to be. In other words, let me go to the overhead and try to explain this. If I were to give you the problem 2 plus 2, most of you would say 4 just out of memory. You remember that from 3rd grade. If you believe that 2 plus 2 is 4 because somebody says so, what will you do with that problem? But somebody hasn't told you that, the answer to that one. What will you do? Oh, fingers and toes. All right. Okay, you fingers and toes people. Here's one for you. Okay. Solve for A and B. You remember doing how to solve for 2 unknowns? You did that every day, didn't you, Dave? And even more. Actually, mathematics conforms to a set of rules. And there are the associative laws of addition. And that associative laws of addition says you can take 2 marks and you can add 2 marks and you're going to get the result is 4 marks. In algebra, if you're going to learn algebra, algebra conforms to 6 rules. If you know the 6 rules of algebra, you can solve any algebraic equation. And the way that you test your answer is to go to the rules. How many of you have taken a math test and guessed at the answer and got it right? Rarely happens, doesn't it? You have better odds on the lottery than taking a math test and guessing at the answers and getting them right. The rules of math are how we prove the answer to be true. And because the rules of math are true, you can take that equation and you can manipulate it in many different ways and still arrive at the right answer. I concluded that Bible prophecy had to follow a set of rules, or else it's a nose of wax that's only a matter of somebody's interpretation. And man A and man B and man C all have their reasons and their fuzzy logic for determining why it needs to be this way. And as I studied the history of prophetic interpretation, going back to Wycliffe, in the 14th century. And even going back to Augustine in the 5th century A.D. and reading forward, I discovered that all of these men end up reading the prophecies, and then they look around in their reality, and then they write how the prophecies fit into their reality. But what happens as realities change through the centuries, different interpretations begin to occur. You understand what I'm saying? Well, when I began studying the prophecies in 1971, about 1970, I didn't know anything about this subject. I didn't have anything to work with, so I just began to read. And I read about this person's view, and I read this person's view, and I read this person's view, and so on and so forth. And then I began to discover, well, wait a minute. Everybody can't be right. How does this work? And so I began questioning. There's got to be a set of guidelines, a set of rules that determine what this means. And the reason that became so crucial to me is because how do we prove a view to be true or false? I had a Bible study back in 1974 with a Church of Christ minister. And it was one of the most wonderful Bible studies in my entire life. I remember it to this day. He was a sincere, godly man. Young man, about my own age at the time. And we were discussing Revelation. This Bible study lasted for 7 hours. I mean, if you're going to talk Bible, get with it. And as a result of that meeting, what I discovered is that this man had a paradigm in which his interpretation of Revelation perfectly fit within. What I discovered about myself is that I too had a paradigm in which my view of Revelation perfectly fit within. The problem I discovered is that his view could not fit in my paradigm. And my view would not fit into his paradigm. There was just no way. You understand? So all that we could do for 7 hours is talk past each other. I walked away from that Bible study with a deep appreciation, not only for him, because he was a genuine Christian person. He treated me with the kindest respect, even though we differed. That's the mark of a Christian. I saw Jesus in that man. And I walked away from that Bible study with a reality that I now understand something that I've never understood before. People have paradigms. This is when I first came to understand paradigms. Paradigms. That's the way it's spelled, you know. It doesn't sound anything like it looks. And I came away with an appreciation for the fact that everyone has a paradigm. And the more devoutly religious a person is, like a Church of Christ minister, and the Church of Christ that I was dealing with is not what you're thinking. There are various branches of the Churches of Christ, various sects that go by that name. And the Campbellites, that division of the Church of Christ, are probably some of the most devout people on earth. I mean, very, very devout. And when I began to see this paradigm and that I really had nothing to offer him and that he really had nothing that could change me, I saw that in honesty, we both stood at the same place. He's as honest in heart as he could be. And I felt in my heart that I'm as honest as I can be. God help us. You understand the problem? Well, when I began to think about it over the next few weeks, it dawned on me that the interpretation of Revelation and the prophecies were controlled by paradigms. If you're talking to a Mormon, you're going to get a view that conforms to the Mormon paradigm. If you're talking to the Church of Christ, or the Adventist, or the Jehovah's Witness, or the Catholic, you're going to get a paradigm, and their interpretation, of course, is going to fit their view within their paradigm. So I said to myself, wow, is that the way it is, God? Is that the way it really works? Is that you just interpret it according to your paradigm? And then how do you check and how do you go back and check your answers? What do you check them against? Your paradigm? Well, that's ridiculous. If you check your answers against your own body of knowledge, sure, it's going to add up. Because every person's thinking is right in their own mind. Yes or no? I mean, it's the only reality we have is what is inside our own head. And so if we check ourselves against ourselves, we find ourselves to be okay. It's kind of goofy. And I thought, no, it can't work that way. It can't possibly work that way. It's like math. There has to be a formula out here that tells me in what the real meaning of Revelation is. So that as I reach a conclusion about something, I go to the rules, I check the rules, and the rules I ask, does my conclusion conform to the rules so that I have an external vehicle by which to challenge my conclusion? Now, only a guy who's barely normal would have these kind of thoughts. You can look at my grades in school and see that I was barely normal. But, you know, even an idiot can find gold. You just have to be at the right place at the right time. Is that right? When you go out prospecting for gold, I don't know if you've ever done that. I have, up in Colorado. It doesn't matter what degrees you have. It doesn't matter who you are and how much money you've got. All that matters is you're standing at the right place at the right time and you see it. The discovery of gold is just being there to see it. I believe that I have won something far greater than all that the lottery can provide. I told Shirley one day, my wife, I said, you know, honey, I'm the richest man on earth. Because I have found something that I looked for, and I found it. It answers for me a host of questions that I have had for many, many years. And it solves problems in my mind that I've had for many, many years. And I am truly a rich man. I feel like I've won the lottery without all of its headaches. Because I understand that, you know, I saw a documentary on people who've won the lottery. They did a study on showed what happened to the lives of 20 people who had won lottery, and every one of them was a disaster. It was terrible. Terrible what happened. I have found 4 rules that govern the interpretation of prophecy. 4 rules. And one of the rules that we're working on is the Jubilee calendar. This rule states that when the Jubilee calendar is operating, in this box, a day equals a year. Outside of this box, time is literal. God reckons time as literal and literal, but for a day for a year within the Jubilee calendar. Let me show you how I got into this problem. I want to take you to Daniel chapter 10. Whoops, I got to type it right. Notice what, well, I should go to verse 1 first. Let me go back to verse 1. I get these thoughts in my mind, see, and I've already jumped to verse 3, and I said, well, you don't even know what verse 1 is, so I better tell you. In the 3rd year of Cyrus, king of Persia, a revelation was given to Daniel, who was called Belteshazzar. Nebuchadnezzar, renamed Daniel and gave him the Babylonian name of Belteshazzar. Its message was true, this vision, this revelation, and it concerned a great war. A great war. The understanding of the message came to him in a vision. Verse 2. At that time, I, Daniel, mourned for how long? 3 sevens, or 3 weeks. Now, do you realize, watch this, if we go up the calendar, up the Bible here, into Daniel 9:24, I'm just going up about 5 verses, 70 weeks are decreed for your people and your holy city to finish transgression. If Daniel mourned for 3 weeks and 70 weeks are determined upon, you see a problem here? Did Daniel mourn for 21 years? A day for a year? Well, is this 70 weeks in Daniel 9:24? Is this really 490 days? The Hebrew word in both cases is the same. So I hear from all the people who do word studies. There's a lot of folk who write to me over the internet who are just really adamant about word study. This word limits the meaning to this right here. Words, when put together, form concepts. And it's the concept we're after, not the words are a means to an end. Of course, you need to pay attention to the words. But my question is, how can we be a day for a year in one place? 5 verses later, we're talking about 3 literal weeks, when the Hebrew word in both cases is identical. Is that a fair question? Would you raise that question if you were studying time? Probably. You'd get there. And this is why people then who flip over to Daniel 8:14, they want to make sometimes the 2300 evenings and mornings literal time. Right, Gail? Gail likes to do that, see? Yeah, well, that's all right. And then some people like to flip over here to Daniel, 4? Let's see if that's the right place. Let his mind be changed from that of a man, and let him be given the mind of an animal till 7 times pass by for him. 7 times being passed over on Nebuchadnezzar, Nebuchadnezzar, because of his great arrogance and pride, God humbled him, put him out into the field, eating grass like a beast. You've heard the story in Daniel 4. And how long is God consigning him out there? 7 times. 7 times. And how long would 7 times be? 7 years. Well, then how long would a time times and half a time be? 3.5 years. Well, thank you very much. Or no, a time would be 7. Times would be 14. That'd be 21 and half a time. So 21.5 years? There you go. Do you understand what I'm doing to you? Huh? Confusing you. Teachers call this cognitive dissonance. You can call it Babylon. Confusion. All these time periods, how do you deal with them? How do you deal and separate out these time periods? I'm trying to help you understand the nature of the problem so that when the solution arrives, you'll see how wonderful the solution actually is.
Your paradigm takes care of the whole problem. That's supposed to be a joke. You already have it all figured out. It all fits quite well.
Yeah. See, what happened on the way to in studying the Bible, listen, let me tell you something about studying the Bible. And I'm dead serious about this. If the Bible is not producing cognitive dissonance in your life, you're not studying, you're reading. If the Bible is not forcing you into questions, if the Bible is not prodding you into re-examining everything you constantly believe, you're not studying. You're playing with the Bible. If you're just reading the Bible to feel good and to get that touchy-feely kind of experience, you're missing what the Bible really offers. The Bible offers an enormous growth potential spiritually. It can take a person with all kinds of failings and failures and transform him by God's grace into a mighty beacon for the salvation of others. The Bible is a powerful book. It has incredible power. If you've attended church for 20 years, once a week, you've sat in church long enough to get a master's degree. That's right. The number of hours you have sat in the building is enough time to get a master's degree. And I know Christians who've sat in church for 20 years and they still know no more today than they did when they started. It's a tragedy. The Bible will constantly challenge and should be challenging your paradigms. And if it isn't, you're not studying. You're just playing with it. The truth is ongoing. God's flashlight of truth shines down upon the world, and He's moving the flashlight. And the truth you might hold today, if you stand right where you are, you'll soon be in darkness. Because the truth is moving on. That song, the Battle Hymn of the Republic, His truth is marching on. If you're not moving with the truth, you're going to be left in darkness. Truth is not static. How many companies have gone out of business because they could not change their paradigm and get with the advancement of truth? You stay up with it or you get out of it. It's the way it works. The way I came to resolve the problem, as I said, with the Jubilee calendar. And the Jubilee calendar looks like this. You have a chart that looks like this. Chart number 4. Open it up, if you will. And I want to do a little mathematics this morning. We're going to do some 6th grade math. Maybe even 5th grade math. So you don't need to feel intimidated. All right. Jewish scholars cannot, if you survey a dozen Jewish scholars, they will tell you that it is not possible to know whether the Jubilee calendar has 49 years in it or 50. You can call up the local rabbi and he'll tell you these very words. There's no way to know. There's no way to know. We don't know. That's lost in history. Well, dear friends, I want to assure you it is not lost in the Bible. God wouldn't give us and require something that's not there. And I'm going to try to demonstrate this morning that what you are looking at is what the Bible teaches about the Jubilee calendar. I want to read a little scripture first so that you can follow what I'm about to say. I'm going to go to Leviticus 25. We'll pick up where we read yesterday morning just for a matter of review. The Lord said to Moses on Mount Sinai, "Speak to the Israelites and say to them, when you enter the land I'm going to give you, the land itself must observe a Sabbath to the Lord. For 6 years sow your fields, and for 6 years prune your vineyards and gather their crops. But in the 7th year, the land is to have a Sabbath of rest, a Sabbath to the Lord. Do not sow your fields or prune your vineyards." Okay, we come now to an important question. When is the 7th year? Starting from when? When is the Sabbath day? Starting from when? From the first day of creation. When God says the 7th day, remember the 7th day, the Sabbath day, to keep it holy, most people have no idea of synchrony. And so the 7th day can be any day. Because the way we count time, if we start counting here, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, that could be the 7th day. But when God says, remember the Sabbath to keep it holy, what is He talking about? For 6 days labor and do all your work, but the 7th day is the Sabbath of the Lord thy God. What is He talking? What 7th day? The 7th day that is synchronous from the first day of creation. Does that make sense to you? Otherwise, the 7th day is up for a vote. Kathy, who was sitting here yesterday morning, she told me that in Germany, the first day of the week is Monday, when she was growing up as a child, and the 7th day of the week was Sunday on her calendar. And she has a German calendar to show how time was reckoned. And I said, so in Germany they celebrate Easter Monday? Because it's very clear from Scripture, Christ rose from the dead on the first day of the week. And the first day of the week in Germany would be Monday. Well, that calendar has been changed. See, man has pulled all kinds of shenanigans and tricks trying to get away from God's synchrony. God sets the day to begin at sunset. Man doesn't like that. We prefer midnight. Right? God set the month to begin with a new moon. We don't like that. We just start one whenever we want to. God sets the year to begin with the first new moon on or after the spring equinox. We don't like that. We start in January, the middle of winter. You see, Satan, the devil, has done everything he can to lead us away from God's synchrony, because if he does that, then you can't understand the plans of God. But once you understand the synchrony of God's calendar, then the time periods that are prophetic will make perfect sense, and they all line up right on the dime, right on the money. That's what these charts are an attempt to show, is that in every case, when God gives a prophecy, the way He uses the words tells you the synchrony, the starting point in that prophecy. For example, in Daniel 9, we read that from the going forth of the decree, until the appearing of Messiah will be 7 weeks and 62 weeks. Why did God do it that way? Why didn't He just say 69? Well, He did it that way because He's telling us about the synchrony of His calendar. A Jubilee cycle is 7 weeks. A Jubilee cycle will not start in the middle, it starts at the beginning. So that's a clue that the decree that counts will be one that occurs at the beginning of a Jubilee cycle. Make sense? All right. When God said in Daniel 9, know and understand, this is not beyond understanding, see? That's why He puts it this way. Know and understand that the going forth of the decree, from the going forth of the decree unto the appearing of Messiah, will be a 7 weeks and a 62 weeks. He didn't say 69 weeks. He could have, because that's the time frame. God foreknew there would be 4 decrees, but only one of them, only one, happens at the beginning of a 7. 7, 62. Let me show you what the 7 weeks are. Going back to the Scripture, we're faced with a challenge here. For 6 years prune your vineyards and gather their crops, but in the 7th year the land is to have a Sabbath of rest. And I want to tell you that I am positively 100% convinced, based on a host of data, that the Jubilee calendar begins at the Exodus. And the 7th year stems from the year of the Exodus. And you know why I know that to be true? Because when the time we get down to the time of Jesus, what time is Jesus killed? In the middle of what? Of the 70th week, and that would be a Wednesday year. So if we work backwards from Wednesday year, guess what? 1437, the year of the Exodus, has to be a Sunday year. Sunday, Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, Friday, 7th sabbatical year. Sunday, Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, Friday, Sabbath, sabbatical year. You are looking on this chart, right up here in the top left-hand corner, you are looking at the synchrony of the Jubilee calendar, and it starts right here. And so every 7th year, every sabbatical year is listed in red. So the first year of the Exodus is 1437 BC. The first Monday year would be 1436 BC. The Tuesday year would be 1435 BC. You see that red star there in the Tuesday year? That's where God sent the spies in to Kadesh Barnea. From Kadesh Barnea into the Promised Land to spy it out. 1435 BC. And because they came back with a faithless report, they were consigned to the wilderness for 40 years, and this yellow in the chart represents that 40 years. And in the book of Joshua, chapter 5, the Bible says that on the 15th day of the first month, to the very day, they enter the Promised Land. God held them in the wilderness exactly to the day, 40 years. God's timing is right on the money. You can count on it. God is never tardy.
Is there independent data for basing the Exodus starting in 1437?
Did you hear his question? Is there independent data to confirm this? Because of some uncertainties in the history of the co-regent reign of kings. This means like David is on the throne and Solomon, his reign has begun, but David isn't dead. David reigns 40 years, Solomon reigns 40 years, but the total time is not 80. Because of co-regent reigns are not entirely known. The closest that the best scholarship I've seen on this dates the Exodus at 1445. Just a 7-year difference. Well within the tolerances any scholar would allow for such an expansive time period. So, scholars who are aligning the reign of, the dynasties of Egypt with the right pharaoh, aligning the reign of the kings and dealing with the co-regent reigns, and also the kings of other kingdoms like Sennacherib and Shalmaneser and others who are known and historically datable. They put the Exodus around 1445, and the Jubilee calendar nails it down to 1437.
Okay.
So from an academic point of view, well within the range. Sharon?
Larry, I remember reading that there was an archaeologist who had nailed down the date of the fall of Jericho at 1437.
Well,
Remember that article we got?
Well, it wasn't 1437. It would have made the Exodus at 1437. The date of the Jericho fall he put was exactly where we've put it. So you've got to back up 40 years.
Okay, all right, I didn't remember
Yeah.
that.
And in fact, someone sent me a Bible from Australia, the whole Bible. And because they're very interested down there in archaeology. And in the notes of this Bible, the scholars who had written the study notes had concluded the Exodus occurred in 1437. So, and this without knowledge of the Jubilee. I don't know of any scholars who have made a presentation on the Jubilee calendar of any substance. This is all just the result of my own feeble construction and subject to peer review. Trouble is, I can't get scholars to look at it. They just don't want to. The paradigms. I'm nobody. That's the problem. When somebody makes these kinds of claims, we'll take a look. When nobody does, well, it can't be worth anything. We had that problem, that's always been the problem. But anyway, nevertheless, the truth is the truth, whether we believe it or not. It's there, waiting to be discovered.
After you're dead, you're going to recognize it.
Huh?
After you're dead, they'll recognize it.
Posthumously, right? It becomes somehow important. I don't know.
All the great painters and so forth,
Well, that's what happened to the painters, isn't it? Yes. Well, I'm painting a picture here for you. That you can feel free to put this on your wall if you want to. Okay. We go back to the Bible for a second here and notice that at verse 4, but in the 7th year, the Sabbath year I'm defining based on the date of the Exodus. And because the calendar is a continuum, that means it never changes. It's in loops of 7 weeks, constantly. Weeks. We get down to the time of Christ, it's way down here, and Jesus dies in the middle of the week. A Wednesday year. Does that make sense? All right. Now, let's go down to verse 8. Now, this is where it gets kind of interesting. Count off 7 Sabbaths of years. 7 times 7 years. 7 Sabbaths. Look on your chart and count off 7 Sabbaths. And how many years will you have? Okay, look. Here's 1 Sabbath. Here's 1 Sabbath. Here's 1 Sabbath. There's 3. You keep counting off Sabbaths and you end up with 49 years. Right? Everybody see that? Okay. So, 7 times 7 years, so that the 7 Sabbaths of years amount to a period of 49 years. I mean, the Bible does the mathematics for us. Okay, verse 9. Then have the trumpet sounded everywhere on the 10th day of the 7th month. On the day of atonement, sound the trumpet throughout your land. Consecrate the 50th year and proclaim liberty throughout the land to all its inhabitants. All right, let me explain this very quickly to you and show you how this works. I was there. I ought to know. You don't believe that, do you? Here's the Mediterranean Sea, and down here is Egypt, and this is the Promised Land. Here is the Sea of Galilee, or the Jordan River. I guess the Sea of Galilee's down here, isn't it? Did I have it right? The Dead Sea's down here? Yeah, okay. All right, so you understand, you see the Promised Land. When the children of Israel entered the Promised Land, they came out of Egypt over here like this, and they came around here to go through the Jordan River. They're coming in, going toward the west. Okay? When they get here, God has Joshua divide up the land so that every tribe, based on its size, gets a chunk of land. And so every tribe, like Judah and Benjamin, end up here in the south. And because Benjamin is a small tribe, it gets a small piece of land. So all the families of Benjamin live in this piece of land. Now, during the 49 years, you can sell your land. If you need money, you can sell it to a brother, you can sell it to anybody. It's yours to sell. No problem. But God has decreed in the 50th year, the land is to revert to its original family. This would prevent those who are particularly good at business from eventually acquiring all the land. This would prevent those who are good at business and those families who acquire wealth and they just have a knack for it. It would keep them from getting all the wealth. It's an economic issue because God wants them to inherit this land for a long time to come, and in order to do that and to keep so that He can have, He won't have a nation of the few that are extremely rich and the many that are extremely poor. God did it this way. He keeps breaking it up every 50 years. Now, what God is requiring in the 50th year is this. Let's take the, how do I draw this? 42, 43, 44, 45, 46, 47, 48, 49, 50. Okay, here is Sunday, Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, Friday, Sabbath. Okay, the 50th year is what day of the week? Sunday. What we call Sunday. So the 50th year, because time is a continuum, the weekly cycle never stops. So the 50th year has to be a Sunday. But because the 50th year is also the first year in the next cycle. Because Sunday is always the first day of the week. Let me give you a short parallel here. I know I'm running out of, we're going to take it's time for the intermission. Let's take an intermission, and when we get right back, I'll show you how this worked in the case of Pentecost. Pentecost always fell on the 50th day, which was always the first day of the week, and you have the 50th day and the first day being the same day. Let's take a short intermission, and we'll be right back.